The Newton we know today is one of Boston's most prominent suburbs, shaped by its education, public safety, but most recently, rising house prices. Newton home prices reached a median of $1.5 million this year, over $1 million more than the average Massachusetts home value. 2024 marks the 150th anniversary of Newton's cityhood. So how did Newton separate so far from the average Massachusetts home and continue to rise so high? Let's take a look at how we got here. Made up of mostly farmland and bogs, it was only along the Charles River that Newton resembled the industrial progress of other New England towns. This caused the beginning of Newton's population growth. By 1873, more than 17,000 residents had made Newton home, including a confident businessman and politician, James F.C. Hyde, who became Newton's first mayor. Descended from one of the first permanent English settlers of Newton, James Hyde envisioned a new government, a city government, that would better represent the interest of the town. And to Hyde, the interest of the town was expansion. In his first steps as mayor, Hyde persuaded the Boston, Albany, and Charles River Railroad to expand, completing the Circuit Railroad, which connected the north and south sides of Newton to Boston in a massive loop. Along the new railroad, new villages began to pop up, such as Chestnut Hill, Newton Highlands, and Waban. By 1892, the need for local lines had become apparent, and a trolley line opened up on Walnut Street. With the introduction of the trolley, Newton experienced a significant increase in population, nearly doubling to over 43,000 by 1915. Additionally, by 1905, more than 50% of the population were born to foreign parents. These immigrants settled mostly in manufacturing villages where they could find work, such as Nonantum. Having entered the 20th century well established in both population and transportation, Newton seemed well set for the century ahead. But everything was about to change. The automobile allowed for transportation freedom like never before seen in America. This freedom allowed areas untouched by the Circuit Railroad to be accessible to development. With a clamor for this new land, regulation was needed. In 1921, the city proposed its very first zoning regulations, dividing the city into single residences, general residences, business, commercial, and industrial districts. From the very beginning, there was a major push to reserve most of Newton for single-family housing. The Secretary of the Chamber of Commerce stated in the Newton Graphic in 1921 that he understood, "There are others who work in Newton but do not feel they can afford to live in Newton." He proposed, "It would be an advantage if a successful effort could be made to provide modest homes and living conditions within the means of these people." Modest homes and living conditions meant more multifamily houses, which led to the passing of the 1921 proposal allowing both one- and two-family housing in the most restrictive district. This trend of rezoning general housing districts, which provided for three-family or more housing, survived through the Great Depression, with focus shifting to preserving bigger house lots to maintain a suburban feel and ensure that only single houses would remain dominant. Entering the late 1920s and 1930s, as the effects of the Great Depression ravaged the nation, the Roosevelt administration attempted to deal with the issues. In 1934, the first National Housing Act was passed, which denoted how desirable certain areas were for housing, and accordingly how real estate investments should be handled. This began a practice known as redlining, a way to use policy to discriminate and prevent certain people, mainly minorities, from settling in certain areas. By the 1960s, Newton was one of the only markets for larger existing homes. Thus, the average price of a Newton home topped $45,000. This was more than twice the price of a Boston home. These changes were exacerbated by the building of the Massachusetts Turnpike in 1952, which cut directly into the city. Newton resident William F. Callahan created the Massachusetts Turnpike Authority, a massively powerful agency which used private funds. The agency was additionally able to take any lands deemed necessary for highway construction, despite pushback from the residents. This cut directly through Newton's only historically black neighborhood around the Myrtle Baptist Church in West Newton. The residents were given less than a month to vacate and were often given inadequate compensation. Overall, the highway displaced 550 families and sliced through a community that had been around since before Newton's cityhood. Road construction in Newton had gone from making new areas accessible to making Newton largely exclusive, as well as hostile to diverse communities. Housing prices and exclusiveness continued throughout the 20th century into the 21st. Newton grows more unaffordable every day, despite community organization efforts. But could zoning be the key to transitioning to a more affordable and accessible Newton? A 2019 report from the Massachusetts Housing Partnership shows that 261 transit stations have fewer than 10 homes per acre around them. In 2021, Massachusetts passed the MBTA community laws, which require city zoning laws to develop multifamily housing within a half-mile radius of train stations. In Newton, this has led to a proposal to rezone 6 villages in the city just this December, allowing for construction of more housing units in this area. This proposal aims to create taller buildings that can accommodate both residential and commercial spaces. Currently, many businesses in Newton are located in single-story buildings. Under this plan, buildings will be allowed to have heights ranging from 3.5 to 4.5 stories. In order to comply with this law, Newton will need to zone for an additional 8,330 affordable units. Through this, Newton will continue to grow, expand, and build for many years to come. For NNTV, this is Anasha Kaskar.